Okay, next up we have Alejandra Enriquez, who is going to talk to us about some of her fellowship work. Alejandra is currently a Knauss Fellow with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Engineering Research and Development Center, Civil Works R&D Program, that's a mouthful. She completed her master's in marine biology in 2020 and uses her skills in art and science communication to advise on strategies which ERDC can use to increase stakeholder engagement. Alejandra works to bridge the gap between arts and sciences and is passionate about translating conservation topics to audiences of different cultures and languages. All right, Alejandra, take it away.
Thank you very much for that introduction. So as was said, my name is Alejandra Enriquez, and today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about my work with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and my experience within the Knauss Fellowship in performing science communication. So I will be first talking to you a little bit about myself and my background, and then I'll go into a little bit about the importance of communications. Then I will go over a couple of projects, but before that I will be doing just a slight overview of ERDC and the Army Corps of Engineers, and then we'll go into specific details of two different projects that I've been working on behalf of the Army Corps. The first will be the Civil Works R&D webpage, and the second will be on the U.S. Coastal Research Program and my experience with the communications team. And so the first thing that you should know about me is that I am not a typical marine biologist, actually. I come from a literal desert city and was pulled away by the magnificence of the ocean and the lure of the many ocean animals that live within it. The second thing that you need to know about me is that I worked in graduate school with some marine bacteria whose essentially only life purpose is to reproduce within muddy environments and basically create poop that's orange. And we all know that as rust. And so what do I do with this information? You may be wondering, what can I do with that? Well, part of that is my job is to do science communication, and I've been doing that for several years, actually. And in addition to that, of course, the third and final thing that you might need to know about me is that I am also an artist. So I use various tools of communication, including visual art, in order to communicate aspects of marine science and aquatic science as well. And so that brings me to an introduction of why we need to communicate and why it's important to communicate science and research. So one aspect of that is science communication is important to translating the research and tools for the benefit of, for example, stakeholders or the general public. And so if I didn't catch your eye with that introduction, I might have been steering you away, but that's okay. It may not be for everyone, of course, but it's still important to understand how communication relates to being able to grab one's attention and also communicate the important aspects of a particular research topic. Additionally, for communications, we want to know the who, what, where, when, and why. Obviously, those are very important to establishing communications. And finally, one particular aspect that is extremely important, particularly in the federal government, is knowing what information needs to be put on an internal level versus external level. And I'll be getting into that a little bit more within my presentation as we go on. But for now, what you need to know is that there is a difference, and it can be really important when establishing your audience. And so just to give you a short background on the Army Corps of Engineers, this here is a screenshot of the basic organizational structure of the Army Corps. And I know it's a little bit complicated, so I won't go too much into detail, but the basics that you can probably need to know is that we have up top the USACE headquarters, which is actually in Washington, D.C., and among that, it's distributed into the different divisions, and then we have the different districts as well within those divisions. And so In particular, I want to focus your attention on the military construction and civil works, which is what I am part of. So I am working with the Engineering Research Development Center, which is ERDC for short, and we do a lot of research and development, obviously, within the namesake. And this basically focuses on civil works, which is anything that can be of benefit to the public and overall to our nation as a whole. And so the Army Corps of Engineers Engineering Research and Development Center, ERDC itself, has various labs, 7 labs actually, and each of these labs are located in different regions. However, a large majority of them are located at the ERDC HQ, which is in Vicksburg, Mississippi. One of those includes the Coastal and Hydraulics Lab, which is where I am doing my role in, primarily as I work under the Coastal and Hydraulics Lab as assistant to the technical director of the Civil Works Research and Development Program. And so within ERDC, there are actually several research areas of focus that includes military engineering, engineered resilient systems, environmental quality and installations, high performance computing, geospatial, research and engineering, and then civil works and water resources. But of course, I mainly focus on the civil works aspect of that research, and we'll only be focusing on that today. But of course, you can go to the ERDC website on which you can find and to find out more information about the different research areas. And so, coming from this mindset of civil works, research and development, the main task then is to figure out for me during my fellowship, how could I help to increase communications across the many programs within civil works R&D. And so this was a major task because a lot of the times there's plenty of information out there on the internet. However, sometimes that information is spaced out and sparsed out throughout the various programs. And so there's a lot of very specific information, including research and tools that would be extremely beneficial, for example, for a researcher, or graduate student researcher, postdocs, etc., who may not be able to find the exact placement of that research tool. And so with that in mind, I decided to propose creating a web page to specifically combine all the many different programs available within Civil Works R&D, and then put that on a single web page with links and various interactive topics so that eventually this could be turned into a full-facing public web page available for anyone to check out. And just to give you a background on this, Civil Works itself is divided into several programs and provides several things. So I bet you may have known about the work that the Corps does with, for example, construction and dams. But what you might not know a little bit more about is that they actually do a lot of work with the environment. So in terms of environment, they do ecosystem restoration and habitat restoration and protection, wildfire protection as well, and management. And so a lot of that even includes threatened and endangered species as well. And so there's a lot of these components that come in to the aspect of how civil works research and development occurs that may not necessarily be as a bright, a very well-known spot on the main web page, which is on the Army Corps webpage or even on the ERDC website itself. And so my simple task, or not so simple, was to put those together into a web page that could be designed to give that information to anyone who might seek it. Now, there were some various challenges in trying to do such a project, including the web format, specifically because within the Army Corps, there's certain formats that have to be followed within creating any sort of web page. And so you have to work with the Public Affairs Office and the web designers team and the communications team as well. So it's a lot of work with several teams within the federal agency, in this case, the Army Corps of Engineers, to specifically find out how you can even put that information on a page that can be navigated and updated and also protected for updated and protected for security reasons. And another issue with that as well includes the constraints with mobile media uploads. For example, being able to upload certain audio and video and interactive components onto a web page format is highly dependent on the format itself and of course on the server as well. And so trying to find that balance can be incredibly difficult when designing this. And finally, using organization of information from the various programs in a cohesive manner to bring everything together, but also have it in such a way that it's organized in a neat and clear fashion was also an incredible challenge. And so what I found with some of those solutions is to initially, we broke down the design for the Army Corps webpage. So we would mainly focus on getting the information necessary first to the internal workforce of the Army Corps, for example, engineers, branch chiefs, district managers, etc., who may have or want to know what is going on within civil works, for example, updates to research, things that happen in the news, which may be out on regular social media and on the websites, but again, are very scattered throughout, and there's no one central hub for that, and it can be incredibly difficult to do that. And so that was the initial design. And then creating another solution for the constraints with media uploads is obviously working with a template that already works well within the federal government or within that federal agency, and taking from that and figuring out what exactly can you put within those constraints as a kind of basis, and then maybe in the future move it to a web page that could be more editable and more user-friendly. And so, for example, I created an interactive map with the various districts to review across the nation, basically, where different research was occurring. So across the storyboards that are available for the Corps. And again, this is all internal. Right now, I created a map and then posted those on a PowerPoint slide and then uploaded the slide onto the web page, which was then you could then click on it and it would take you to the external web link. So that was one solution. And then organizing by structure was a solution to how to organize the different research programs, because again, the Army Corps of Engineers and ERDC is a very large institution and has very many programs, which each has its own different unique role. And so we organized it basically by the different programs, so tactical, operational, and strategic programs. And eventually, now we are in the process of getting some feedback from the various branch chiefs as well as other individuals who are in charge of these programs, and will eventually not only have that one web page for internally so that everyone within the Corps can see it, but also move some of that information onto a public facing web page in the future, so that others can understand, where can I find these tools? Where can I find this research? Because again, it is very difficult to organize it in such a way that you can actually find something very easily. And so that will be a project for the future. Now, the second project that I wanted to talk about was something that I have been working on throughout my Knauss Fellowship, and that is the U.S. Coastal Research Program. So the U.S. Coastal Research Program, or USCRP for short, is a very interesting program because it is unique in the fact that it takes from academic, so academia, takes from federal agencies and non-government organizations, and puts all of those together in one large program of that is highly cooperative and creates research specifically for understanding predictions in natural and human intervention processes over multiple timescales. So basically anything related to coastal processes and how that affects us in general. And so the USCRP, since its founding, has provided a total of $11.4 million in funding to university research and education programs. And so the basic structure of building this program and building that community of practice revolves around 4 basic things. We want to include academics and student awards and to enhance funding. We want to foster collaborations through workshops and community-led experiments. We want to promote scientific translation of that research to stakeholders and to the general public, and identify research priorities, again, with thematic workshops and interagency cooperation. And so part of this includes the DUNEX experiment, or the During Nearshore Event Experiment, which was basically a long-term experiment that revolves around multiple projects of research from multiple PIs, or professional investigators, who come in to these sites across Duck, North Carolina, and they place equipment out there and they take measurements, and then afterwards they gather all of that research and data and then translate that, of course, through publications and also communications. And that's part of what the USCRP does as well, in both funding and helping to disseminate that information. And so I actually got to help with one of these DUNEX days. So this was called a VIP day, where we had basically over about 40 different stakeholders come in and learn about the research that was going on site. And it was a lot of fun. If you can see right there in the picture, I'm somewhere in there on the corner. But I also was able to use my artistic skills to design a t-shirt for the researchers right there up on the corner as well. So this event brings together all of the researchers and the various stakeholders to better understand what's going on our coast, from what goes on with flooding and hurricanes to coastal ecosystem protection and understanding that balance that occurs there. And part of the communications team role is not only to report on DUNEX, which is now at its end, but continue that communication throughout the U.S. Coastal Research Program. And so one other fun thing that I wanted to share with you all is that we actually also did an event afterwards of DUNEX that incorporated art and science. And so we had an aerialist named Lindsay Grace from Siculation. If I mispronounce it, I apologize. But she's an aerialist from Roanoke who worked with one of the PIs, Dr. Nina Stark, from Virginia Tech, and she had reached out to us about creating a post-DUNEX event about basically interpreting that knowledge and interpreting that research through aerialist dancing. And so they held 2 sessions, both of which were on the town hall right outside, and there were quite a few people that showed up. And afterwards, there were researchers who were able to participate from that area who were involved with DUNEX, who were able to answer any questions that the public might have So this was actually a very interactive experience and highly collaborative. And I think that the USCRP has taken an interest with this, and further events that happen in the future with DUNEX might incorporate some more of this research. So it's a very exciting thing to see that, as an artist and scientist myself, this is starting to take interest within the academic side and the research side of things. And so from all of that experience, there are some conclusions to be made, of course. You may have heard of the term location, location, location. Well, when it comes to science communication, it's audience, audience, audience. It might not sound as how do you say it? It might not sound as great as location, 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 of course, but it's still highly important to science communication. The second is that communications across various organizations, especially when you're talking about the federal government, takes a lot of time, work, and is constantly evolving. And so in order to better disseminate that information to the public, we need to better understand how communications works together within that framework. And again, audience is a big indicator of how we do that. And then, of course, for the future efforts, I know that the USCRP is actually is taking steps, of course, to include underrepresented communities, and I have been a part of that as well, and plans to improve future efforts for diversity, equity, and inclusion, which can be, in fact, helped by increasing communications, just by disseminating that information to the public. Maybe undergraduate students who are interested in such programs will be able to help in the future, just simply by expressing interest. And so those are some of the interests, those are some of the main lessons that I have learned throughout my experience with the Knauss Fellowship, and are also highly relevant to anyone who's interested in doing a communications career or working in this aspect, either within the federal government or otherwise. And with that, I would like to thank you very much for taking time to listen to my presentation. And I will throw out my email if you are interested in learning more about these programs that I have worked with, or in science communication, or if you want to talk on a more professional level. I have posted my professional email on that slide. I also have LinkedIn under that headline as a Knauss Fellow, marine biologist, and illustrator. And if you are interested a little bit more about my art and what I do with science communication with that art, you can check out my website at marinebioartist.com. And of course, also check out myself on social media for Marine Bio Artist as well. So thank you very much.